Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us, CMU colleagues from near and far. I am here to kick us off on sharing about a project that had a lot of teamwork involved. In today's session, you'll be hearing from two of my wonderful colleagues, Zach Mineroff and Lydia Eckstein. I also want to highlight that a few other colleagues who were instrumental in this work are in the Zoom room. I think there's Allison Connell-Pensky, Laura Popmeyer, Mike Melville. I'm looking, is there any other colleague in the room who worked on this project? I think that might be it. In any case, we're all very glad to share out with you some of the work that we've been doing, actually also in partnership with a number, dozens of CMU colleagues who are instructors of record and faculty who actually tested some of the modules that we will be sharing on. One of the things we wanted to highlight before we get going, seeing that there is a large number of participants in our Zoom room, really glad to have you all here today. Almost 100, that's pretty cool. If you have questions during the first part of the session where we'll be presenting slides, we'd request that you put questions in the Zoom chat. If they're urgent, burning clarification questions, one of us might chime in, but we also will set aside a good chunk of time at the end for the questions that came up in chat and for any other Q&A or discussion that folks are interested in. So keep that in mind. Also wanted to let folks know that we are recording the session, as you probably saw when you entered the room, so that we can share that out with you and other folks who signed up but weren't able to attend, as well as some of the resources that we'll be sharing at the end. So if you could go to the next slide, Zach, I think I'll jump right in to give a preview that what we want to start with is to introduce this project's motivation and goals to just sort of frame up the work. And then I'll turn it over to Zach, who will describe the modules, how they were designed, the format, the learning objectives they're designed to achieve, and show you some sample pages so you can get a feel for it. Then we'll hear from Lydia, who will describe a study design and the procedure we use to actually rigorously study and assess the efficacy of these modules. She'll share some key findings, and then we'll go back to Zach to talk about next steps we've been working on and how you can get involved before the Q&A. So with that, I will just start with that first bullet point and share that, as you know, generative AI hit the scene quickly and was very swiftly adopted with lots of change and impact on higher ed, as well as lots of industries and sectors in society. And as a part of that, our community at CMU identified the need to help students develop competency in generative AI. And by that, I want to highlight that we mean both what generative AI is, whether to use it. So we're not just saying that we're presuming use is appropriate or a good thing. And then if it is, when it is appropriate to use, how to use it appropriately. Our target audience for this project is CMU students in their role as learners. Of course, we hope that other members of the CMU community might also benefit from, looking over the modules, and so that we all have a shared common ground on these points. With that in mind as our motivation, we had two goals for the project. Number one, we wanted to create a set of modules, online instructional modules, designed to improve students' generative AI competency. And we'll go into details on what we mean by that. It does include knowledge of generative AI, skills related to, and self-efficacy around using generative AI. In addition to just designing and developing the models, getting them out there in the world, we also wanted to do something that we at the Eberly Center, and my personal tradition, is to actually take an empirical approach to this work and design and conduct a study to assess how effective the modules are in terms of improving students' competency in this area, both to understand whether they're working and where they are and where they aren't, to guide improvements to the module. So that's kind of what we'll talk about today, sort of the background and results related to both of those goals. And with that, I'll turn it to Zach.
Yeah, thank you, Marcia. So yeah, to achieve those project goals, we designed a set of online modules, making extensive use of community input from CMU students, faculty, and staff. And so this included a survey of like well over 2,000 students, a mix of undergraduate and graduate, as well as over 300 faculty. And the survey surfaced like some common themes in what students need to know about generative AI. So things like understanding policies to avoid academic integrity violations, identifying whether and how to use these tools in the context of a course, selecting appropriate tools and using effective prompting skills, and also learning about ethical and privacy concerns. And then we also conducted follow-up focus groups with, I think, like over 150 faculty, students, and staff, which showed agreement with those themes from the survey. And then in addition to that survey, the actual design team itself included faculty, student, and staff subject matter experts. So the people writing the exercises and the instructional content for the modules had a variety of perspectives from our community. And this team was led and guided by Eberly Center staff through a learning engineering process that incorporates best practices for learning into the design of the modules. So this includes, as you'll see, regular active learning with feedback. So the students are actively practicing with the content throughout the modules instead of only reading or watching videos. We also aim to minimize the instructor's burden when incorporating these modules into their courses. So they are designed to be easily adoptable in that students complete them online, asynchronously, and outside of class, and transferable to different contexts. So the lessons are discipline agnostic and could apply to students in any CMU course. So all in all, the modules take about 90 minutes to complete, and they can do them on their own pace over multiple sittings. So that hour and a half can be spread out over a few days. So what should students learn after completing these modules? Well, again, guided by that community's input, we wanted to improve students' generative AI knowledge and skills. And so namely be able to describe the basics of generative AI, how generative AI tools are built and how they work, explain why students' decisions to use or not use generative AI tools may differ across individuals, contexts, tasks, and goals. So in other words, cultivate a student's inclusive thinking mindset about how different learners will be impacted by using these tools, and that there's no one right decision related to using them. 3, to analyze ethical implications and other potential concerns of these tools to decide whether or not, whether and when to use them. And 4, when it is appropriate to use generative AI, how to identify and apply strategies to responsibly use it for a given educational task. So this includes things like prompt engineering and taking steps to review and validate what the generative AI actually outputs. And then in addition to these skills, we also wanted to improve students' self-efficacy. And we hope that students would report an increased level of self-efficacy for appropriately using or not using generative AI tools in different educational situations. So what do these modules actually look like? Well, there are 4 overarching topics that you can see here that contain activities aligned with the learning objectives that we just showed. And these activities are implemented within Canvas. So it's an environment that students are already familiar with. They don't need to create an account on a new platform or anything like that. It just shows up in their Canvas dashboard, just like any other CMU course site. And also as shown here, they are set up so that students must complete these modules in sequential order. So at the beginning, only the first module is unlocked, and then the subsequent modules unlock in order when they finish the previous ones. So this next slide shows an expanded view of the first module. And each module is just a sequence of Canvas pages with instruction and embedded activities. So again, students have to complete these pages within a module in sequential order. And in this view, students can see which pages they have already viewed so far and which ones they still need to complete. The first module, or sorry, the first page within each module is always an overview page that summarizes the learning objective for that section and helps students know what to expect in the upcoming pages. So now let's look at one of those actual instructional pages to see what it looks like. So as mentioned, each page contains organized instruction aligned with the learning objectives in the form of text or images, video, and links. But there are also regular opportunities for active learning embedded directly on these pages. So after a paragraph or a video or something like this, the students will see some form of targeted practice with instant automated feedback. So here's an example of a multiple choice style question. The student has selected the first response here, which ended up being incorrect. But that's okay because these activities are meant to be low stakes practice questions that help students learn, and students can retake these as many times as they need. And you can see here that the activities don't only tell students if they were right or wrong, it actually provides an explanation of why their response was correct or incorrect. And that explanation will vary depending on the response that they chose. As another example of active learning, in addition to those multiple choice style questions, the modules also prompt students to practice using generative AI for a task. So in this example, it has step-by-step instructions for logging into Microsoft Copilot using their Android ID, which is a CMU vetted FERPA compliant tool that protects their data. And then after they do so, the modules prompt students to reflect on their experiences in more open-ended prompts that also give them feedback. So in all, the students get a mix of these conceptual checkpoint style questions, as well as some of these more authentic experiential tasks. So we designed these modules thoughtfully, right, with community input and some of these best practices in mind. But did they actually support students' learning in the way that we hoped? And to figure that out, we conducted a study, and I'll hand that off to my colleague Lydia to explain the study design and the procedure.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. Next slide, please. So in line with our second project goal, we wanted to evaluate the module's effectiveness, as Zach said, on Gen AI knowledge, skills, and self-efficacy. And we wanted to do that in a large-scale study across campus. So to do so, instructors responded to an open call in the summer of 2024. And we ended up recruiting 46 unique instructors who taught 53 unique courses for a total of 65 sections. We collected data during the first week of the fall semester, and our final sample consisted of 1,477 students who consented and completed all required assessments. The students that we recruited were randomly assigned by course section to either treatment or control condition, and I will describe in a moment just how these conditions differed. Next slide, please. So to assess the effectiveness of the modules, every student completed a pre-test and a post-test that consisted of 8 multiple choice and 1 matching questions, all of which were aligned with the content of the modules, and those were designed to assess knowledge and skills. In addition, we wanted to get students to demonstrate their skills by completing 2 authentic tasks, which got at students' prompt engineering and evaluation of output skills. And lastly, we wanted to measure students' self-perceived confidence in using Gen AI ethically and effectively. And to do that, we created 11 items to measure the self-efficacy. So a sample item here, maybe I can identify when using Gen AI would be inappropriate in my courses. What's important to know is that unlike during the module, students did not get feedback on any of their responses during the pre-test or the post-test. Next slide. Thank you. So let me give you a little bit more detail about the authentic tasks. In the first authentic task, students were asked to prompt engineer, to write a prompt. And to do that, they were told to prepare for a presentation in an undergraduate course and to seek Gen AI assistance with brainstorming ideas to teach a typically difficult concept. Students were then asked to type out their initial prompt for a chatbot of their choice and to reflect on it. Next slide. In the second authentic task, students were asked to evaluate output produced by GenAI. And so they were told GenAI produced this in response to an essay prompt from a professor. And then they were asked to identify two different aspects of this output that may call for additional scrutiny. So this may be something like the need to check facts or check sources, or for students to demonstrate an awareness for the potential for Gen AI to produce biased output. Next slide. So here's an overview of our study design and procedure. Again, students at the course level were randomly assigned to either treatment or control condition. During the first week of classes, students in both conditions had access to the pretest during the same fixed 48-hour window. Once that pretest window had closed, students in the treatment condition only were given 48-hour access to the modules. Once that time was up, students again in both conditions had access to the post-test during a fixed 48-hour window. And so the big difference here is that students in the treatment condition completed the modules between the pre-test and the post-test, whereas students in the control condition could only access the modules after the post-test had closed. And all in all, this design allowed us to test the effect of engaging with the modules on developing knowledge, skills, and self-efficacy. So let me tell you a little bit about what we found. Next slide. So our first key finding is that students' performance on multiple choice items, which again measured knowledge and skills, improved significantly in both conditions. Importantly, however, even though both conditions started in the same place, the improvement was much more pronounced in the treatment condition, as you can see here with the steeper increase of the dotted line. That's our treatment condition. And so this means that engaging with the module significantly improved GenAI knowledge above and beyond other influences on students' performance. Next slide. Our second key finding is that the modules improved students' prompt engineering skills. As a reminder, the task here was for students to write an initial prompt for a chatbot of their choice to get the most valuable response for their goals. We scored, at least 2 raters scored a subset of randomly selected submissions, and then we averaged those scores. Again, students in both conditions started at the same level, but in this case, only students in the treatment condition, that's the dotted line again, improved over time, whereas students in the control condition did not. In all, this means again that engaging with the modules improved students' prompt engineering skills, which they demonstrated to us by crafting more effective and more detailed prompts. The third key finding is that the modules did not impact critical analysis of output. Again, as a reminder, students here in the second authentic task were asked to identify 2 different aspects of GenAI produced output that might require further investigation. We scored the same subset of student submissions. Again, at least 2 raters did. We averaged those scores. And on this task, we did not see meaningful improvement over time in either group. So this means that there's no evidence that engaging with the modules improved this particular skill in the way that we measured it. Next slide. Our last key finding is that the modules did improve self-efficacy. As a reminder, self-efficacy is the self-perceived confidence in effectively and ethically using Gen AI. Again, you can see that at pre, our treatment and control conditions did not differ, and we detected an increase in both groups. But again, the gains were substantially larger in the treatment condition, dotted line. So again, interacting with the modules significantly improved students' self-efficacy above and beyond other influences. So to sum up, what we know is that the modules effectively improved students' knowledge, their prompt engineering skills, and their Gen AI self-efficacy. What we also know is that it seems that training critical analysis of output may need to be strengthened. And follow-up analyses here suggest that this is especially true for helping students recognize that there may be bias in Gen AI produced output. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Lydia. So, okay, with all those great findings and everything, where do we go from here? So as Lydia showed, right, we have lots of wonderful data and we want to leverage all that to make informed improvements to the modules themselves, but then also iterate on the pre and post assessments as well. And as we develop better versions of these modules, we all, of course, also want to provide access to it across the CMU community. But at the same time, right, based on community input and the findings from the study, we felt that it was important to incorporate elements of these modules into core at CMU, which is a required course taken by first-year undergrad students. And we'll do this starting in the fall 2025 upcoming semester. So in fact, a lot of this generative AI content was already incorporated into this core course. So if you are teaching first-year students like this fall, they will have seen most of this content already. But how can you get involved now, right? Especially if your students are not first years and will not have taken that updated core course. Well, first, if you would like to preview the modules, you can self-enroll in the Canvas site with the modules using this link here, which we will post in chat and can also send a follow-up email later. So don't worry if you don't grab it. And so, yeah, you can use this self-enroll as a student. You'll be able to preview the modules yourself. And then if you want to actually assign the modules in your own course, again, for second year students or later because they will not have seen it, first you should allot, right, 90 to 120 minutes of out of class time as part of the student's workload. We don't want to just overburden students with everything they have going on. So make sure you're not just adding on top of a full course load, but thoughtfully allotting this time as well into their what they need to do. And then you'll fill out this Google form, which we'll post in chat and send in a follow-up email. And then that will indicate your interest in assigning the modules to your students in your own course. So after you fill out that form, we'll send you instructions for setting it up. The form will give you an option to include a post-test for these modules as an assessment for this course, so you can include it with or without that. One caveat about the current version of the modules is that we can't directly give you data on students' completion of those embedded active learning activities. So if you do want to count this towards students' grades, you can either ask them to submit a screenshot of the final screen, which they can only access after going through all of the pages in order, or you can administer that post-assessment, which we can import into your Canvas site more directly. So this will all be explained in the Google form, and if you indicate you're interested, we'll give you clear instructions by email as well. And finally, this is an ongoing project, so you can check our Gen AI modules website for updates about this in the future.